Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. In today's video, I'll be using two different moulding methods in an attempt to capture the beautiful textures and patterns found in macrame cords and yarns. Once made, the moulds can be used to make coasters and candle vessels with Jesmonite or plaster, which look like they really are made of yarn. If you would like to see the experimental process that I went through to make all of this, sit back and enjoy. I was recently given some macrame thread from one of my patrons, Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer. And I've been trying out making a few different things, and I made this coaster. I had the idea to try and make a mould of it, and so I'm using this iGum moulding paste. It's not like the liquid silicone that I usually use. It's more of it's like clay, and you can press it onto whatever you're moulding, and it makes a really good impression of what you're moulding. And the reason I'm using that, like I say, is because it's not liquid, and you know that my theory is that it's not going to soak into the thread of the coaster. The iGum rubber comes in two parts and it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So I'm just weighing both parts to make sure they're both exactly the same. Once it was all weighed out, I just needed to mix it together in my hands, and it's good that it's two different colours because you can see clearly if there's any bits that aren't mixed together. So you just keep squidging and squeezing and rolling it in your hands until it's one uniform pale yellow colour. Once it had mixed, I just flattened it out and started applying it over the coaster and trying to press it into all the little indentations and giving really good thorough pressing all over and all around the sides. So this iGum rubber is from Resin Pro. I will put a link to it in my video description, and if you would like to purchase it, I will be able to give you a discount code as well. I'll put that in the description. I think, yeah, it's a 10% discount code. I'll put that in the description. They do only ship to Europe, I believe, which is a shame. But yeah, if you're in Europe, you can get this one. But I'm sure there are other similar alternatives in other countries. I think it said on the pot that it's ready to demould in about 20 to 30 minutes. But I actually left this a couple of hours because I had a feeling I might need to be quite rough with it when I was demoulding. So yeah, I gave it extra time just to be sure that it was properly cured. And as predicted, it was quite tough to get out of the mould. I was pushing mould making to the limits really by trying to mould something that's so porous like fabric or yarn. And I knew there could be a problem, but if you don't try, you don't know, do you? Anyway, it did come out, and I found that by pulling the coaster to bits, because I'd only glued it together with glue gun, luckily it wasn't sewn together. Just by unravelling the coaster, that was the best way to get it out of the mould. And that was fine because I only made the coaster to make a mould from it. I wasn't going to use it. It was solely for the purpose of making this mould, so I didn't mind. And yeah, once I started doing it that way, it came out quite easily. Once the original coaster was out of the mould and I had a good look, I was really excited to see all that detail that had been captured by the iGum mould paste. It looked really good, and yeah, I was so excited to pour some Jesmonite in and see how it would turn out. Now, kind of disregard this one. I got into quite a mess getting the mixing the colour. This isn't the colour it was supposed to be, and I really didn't like the colour it turned out. But it doesn't matter. Forget about the colour. Wait until you see the detail. That's the important thing. Now, because it was such a detailed mould, I knew that there were going to be a lot of places where air bubbles were likely to be trapped. And so I did give it a lot of bashing around and a lot of flicking of the sides, everything I could do to try and avoid air bubbles. But I did have a little bit of a problem with bubbles and this mould, which I'll talk about again in a few minutes. But yeah, I did do everything I could to eliminate bubbles, and I even rubbed it with, I mixed a Q-tip in there, mixed it all around with a Q-tip and touching all the surface of the mould to try and make sure it was completely coated. And yeah, you'll see in a minute how it turns out. So when I first demoulded the Jesmonite coaster, my first impressions were really good. I was really pleased with the effect, and it looked just like it was a real macrame coaster. But on closer inspection, I did find that there were quite a lot of little trapped bubbles in there, and I tried to make several of these, and each time trying more and more to bash it around and vibrate the table and everything I could think of to avoid bubbles, and I couldn't avoid it. When you look close, you can see the little imperfections, and I just wasn't 100% happy about that. So I started to wonder whether it was the problem with the mould rather than the Jesmonite and what I was doing to get rid of bubbles. I had a feeling that it was the mould, and whatever I did, those little imperfections would always be there. And so I decided to have a second attempt. This time I decided to make a little pot because I wanted to make a candle, and this pot was to pour my candle wax into, if it worked. And so the pot is just a simple Jesmonite pot that I made with another mould that I had, and I've wrapped macrame cord around it and attaching it with hot melt glue from my glue gun in intervals, just lots of little bits of glue, and just as I wrapped it round, just adding more glue. Because I knew that when I demoulded it, I might have to pull it apart just like I did with the coaster. Anyway, I'm using my usual silicone here, and it's Pure Mould from Resin Pro, and I love this silicone, but I was very worried that it was going to be a complete waste. I just thought that, it's just going to soak into everything, and that pot is not going to come out of the mould. But if you've seen my other videos, you might know by now that I'm a little bit of a gambler when it comes to this kind of thing. I like to just be brave and just try, just to see, and take those risks. And it really was a risk, but let's see what happens. Now I'm going to tell you about the demoulding now because I don't have footage of it. And the reason I don't have footage of the demoulding was because when this silicone had cured and I went back to it and looked at it, I thought, there is no way that pot's coming out of that mould. Really, I really thought that. And I sat there and just started anyway. I thought it was just going to be a complete disaster, so I didn't start filming. But it came out eventually. What I had to do, like I predicted, was pull at the cord while it was all still in the mould, and I managed to pull the cord off the original Jesmonite pot that I'd wrapped it around. I got pulling the cord, and it did come out in the end. So I'm not necessarily recommending that you do this, but I had a feeling that people would be asking how I did this pot, so that's why I've shown it. But I'm telling you now, it didn't come out easily. So anyway, let's have a look at what happened when I put Jesmonite into the mould. So as I said, I'm using Jesmonite and it's AC100. I've coloured it with mica powder. It's the J. Diction Ocean Blue mica powder. And I like the way the mica powders work with Jesmonite. You get a nice pastel-y colour. For the pot, I just added a little bit of the Jesmonite at first and gave it a good squidge around. Then added a bit more and gave it another squidge around, and then topped it up to the top. That way you can give it a really good move around and a good squeeze without everything flowing over the top. After about half an hour, it was ready to take out of the mould. And I've got to say, I couldn't see any difference with the amount of bubbles. You know, I was saying about the other one, there was a few imperfections in the top and a few bubbles. And really, I couldn't see much comparison. I was hoping that this one would be a lot better, but I don't really see much difference. But I still think it looks really good. It's just a shame about the bubbles, and I don't think I'm going to be able to avoid it. It's just going to be something I'll have to accept. So yeah, it was worth a try, and the liquid silicone did work just as well as the one I used first, the eye gum putty kind of silicone. They both worked. I think I do prefer the liquid silicone to use, and it looks much nicer in the finished mould as well. And of course, you wouldn't be able to do the pot mould with the eye gum. You do really need liquid silicone for that. It's much more flexible when you get your finished mould. The pot was a lot trickier to get out of the mould, but it came out in the end. But unfortunately, when it did, it was completely out of frame, so here is your close-up now. Again, you might be able to see that there are some bubbles, but I think it's unavoidable in these highly textured moulds. I think I'll have to live with it. But I'm really pleased with how it turned out. I really love this. I think I prefer these to the coasters, so I'll be making lots of candles. Speaking of candles, let's see what I did next. For my candles, I use wooden wicks and I use 100% natural beeswax, and I really love using beeswax. I think it looks so pretty, and of course it doesn't give off any harmful fumes. So it's a win-win situation, and the wooden wicks are great because they make a kind of crackling noise as they're burning, and it's just quite atmospheric. I will put links to everything in my Amazon storefronts if they're available in your country. I decided to use some clear wax to seal my coasters. You could use Jesmonite sealer or any acrylic sealer really, but I wanted something which I could brush in with my toothbrush. Well, it's not my toothbrush, it's just an old toothbrush. I wanted to be able to brush it into all the little nooks and crannies without it settling in there. So yeah, I didn't want to fill any of that texture, so that's why I didn't brush on a varnish. I just used the wax and used my old toothbrush to get into all the little bits. And now I'm just using some adhesive felt pads on the bottom so that they don't scratch any tabletops. Most of the gifts which I give this year will be handmade, and so this one is going to be packaged up. I'm going to wrap it with some yarn and put it in my box where I'm storing up, like a squirrel, storing up all the things which I will give away at Christmas time so that I don't have to go out buying presents, because everyone likes handmade gifts, don't they? Well, that's my excuse anyway. The experiment wasn't without its ups and downs, but at the end it did turn out okay. Even if there were a few bubbles, I still think they're really beautiful, and I think anybody would be happy to receive them, and especially somebody who likes dressmaking or anything to do with knitting or crochet or something like that. It would be a perfect gift for them. So that brings us to the end of today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you haven't already subscribed and you would like to, please do so and give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And I will see you again next time. Bye for now.